The 6 to 7 Figure Show, episode 15. Ready? Let's hit it.
Broadcasting from the Valley of the Sun outside Phoenix, Arizona. This is the 6 to 7 Figure Show. Tired of working so hard and having no time? Take your six-figure practice and turn it to a thriving seven-figure enterprise. And now, your host, author, speaker, mentor, and strategist, Frank Bria.
Hey everyone, welcome to the 6 to 7 Figure Show. I'm Frank Bria, and today I'm joined by Daniel DiPiazza, who is not only a good friend of mine, but also the founder of Alpha Mentorship. I'm going to say best-selling author anyway, although he thinks that's not that big of a deal anymore. It is a big deal because his book's actually in bookstores. In the middle of a speaking tour, Wielding Power, also right now, which is amazing, by the way. If you get a chance to hit one of those dates up, I highly recommend you get a chance to go. Thanks for being with us, Daniel. How you doing?
Thank you, sir. Good intro. Very strong.
I practiced. We're working on it.
Yeah. No, that was great. Yeah, I'm doing great, man. I'm feeling super good. I've had a great this spring and going into summer. I feel a lot of momentum.
Yeah. So for those of you for those people in the audience who aren't familiar with your work, who can you give us a little background on your business and who you work with and kind of the typical things that you do to help them?
Yeah. So Alpha Mentorship is what I would call the accelerated path for entrepreneurs. What I found over the years, and one of my own personal quest has been into deep personal development over the years. And I found that as I've improved as a person, the business seems to mirror that personal improvement. And once I realized that this is an area that was kind of underserved. There's, this growing group of entrepreneurially, creatively, and intellectually minded young people that want to do things, but we're so focused on strategies and tactics that we don't really think about the person as a whole.
Right.
And so Alpha Mentorship is as a company that focuses on designing and developing programs to train the entrepreneur from the inside out, improving both themselves and their businesses. And we have several different programs to do that.
Right. And what kinds of entrepreneurs do you typically work with? Do you have a vertical area or a focus area?
So there's the hesitation to like ever say, someone is excluded, because of course you want to feel like this is for everybody. But at the end of the day, we know that if it's for everybody, it's for nobody.
Right. And
Alpha Mentorship as an ethos, like the ethos of improve the leader, improve the business, which is our saying, that ethos is applicable to any entrepreneur. But the programs that we have right now inside of the company only really serve a few types of entrepreneurs. One area that we've really doubled down hard on is the service-based entrepreneur. Because I think that there's a low barrier to entry to getting into a service-based business, but then there are all these challenges that come with it. And I have a lot of experience in that personally, so it was of interest to me, and then building a team around these ideas to help coach entrepreneurs through the stages of growing a service-based business.
Okay, so I want to dig into the programs around service-based businesses in a second, but before we do that, going back to sort of, who does Alpha Mentorship serve generally? And, I'm familiar with the feeling that, hey, don't exclude anyone. But
Right.
Let me ask the question slightly differently. What kind of entrepreneur would probably not want to work with Alpha Mentorship? In other words, what are the kinds of sort of principles that are core to the values that are core to you that you would want to see an entrepreneur have before it'd be a real good fit to work with you guys?
Now, that's a good question. I think that, how can I put this? The way that I see the internet marketing industry is almost like if you go to a high school cafeteria and you see the different lunch tables, and each lunch table represents a separate universe. And there's a group there that has their own beliefs and ideas, and it's cliques, it's little friend circles. and everyone has their own inside jokes, and everyone has people who they know aren't part of the group. And I feel like internet business is like that a lot. There are people who, like if it's a spectrum from all the way from, Grant Cardone on one end to to the spirituality gurus on the other end. There's a spectrum in between that where certain groups don't mesh with each other.
Yes.
So, for me, I feel like if you're really only about making money, then we're not going to be the best company to work with on any of our programs, because our programs aren't really about money. They're about changing yourself and changing the culture of your business in order to create changes, which include making more. And there's so much reflection that comes with that sometimes people who just want these strategies and tactics get bored by having to do some of the more fundamental work. But we know, through not just through thought, but through our research and through years of creating these products, that you do have to change on a deeper level in order to have long and consistent progress. And a lot of people just want the quick fix. And so I know it's almost cliche to say, if you're looking for a quick fix, don't choose us. Like every marketer says that, but you really have to be honest with yourself. Sometimes it would be okay to say, hey, listen, I'm not willing to do this type of deep work right now. I'd rather just get to the point.
Yeah, sure. Well, you say bored, it's bored. And I think it's also a recognition that some entrepreneurs just don't necessarily believe that personal transformation is so closely connected to the growth of your business. And therefore, they're probably going to rub up against that issue. I was talking to someone about this just the other day. There are folks who believe that entrepreneurism is essentially an effort in transformation, not only personally, but transformation of the people that you work with. And then there are others that are much more tactical about their views of business. And, and they do have, I guess, a slightly different perspective on the world. And this view that transformation is a necessary element to sort of a successful and impactful service business is an important sort of core value, I suspect.
Yeah, if you think about it, your business is an extension of you. Everything that you put into your business is a result of what you think and do. And so, from my vantage, there's no way that your personal transformation wouldn't lead to a transformation in your business. It would naturally, organically would happen.
Yeah.
And I think the sooner you're able to recognize that and realize that, it's not a question of is that happening? Is there really a connection? There is a connection, and the sooner you realize that, the sooner you'll be able to utilize that connection.
Yeah, yeah. And if you're not ready for it, it's going to be a bumpy road, I guess.
Yeah. It's like global warming, baby. It's here. It's here.
Yeah. Okay. You just have to deal with it. Figure it out.
Yeah.
React.
Don't face the truth.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Cool. So let's pivot back because we talked about programs. What sort of is a core program that you have right now for service-based business entrepreneurs that you're offering?
You know this. You helped me make this program. Profit Paradigm.
Yeah.
Now ask me why I call it Profit Paradigm.
Why do you call it Profit Paradigm?
I'll tell you. Because a paradigm is it's an invisible structure. That's what I've been referring to it as in my talks. And paradigm is basically an invisible structure of beliefs or a framework of ideas that a culture or group of people subscribe to. And these beliefs are almost invisible. They don't even question whether or not they exist because they're just so used to living inside of them. All the things we should or shouldn't do, all the things our parents told us to do, all the things our friends have influenced us to think about and feel like we should do. And we go through our lives living inside of those beliefs. And entrepreneurs go through the same thing. We go through our day and, in our business day, believing that it has to be a certain way. There has to be one way to do this, and that's the only way. And a lot of times that results in suffering because we don't know that there's another less painful way to do this work.
Yeah, sure.
So the entrepreneurs who come into Profit Paradigm are looking for another way to see their business, and they want to completely change everything from the ground up. And so this is a shift for them. It's a paradigm shift, because when they come out the other end of the program, they're going to see their world and the business in a completely different way and be able to operate at a much higher level.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're referring back again to this as a transformation. This isn't a tactical exercise.
No.
This is changing things. So, the clients of yours that go through Profit Paradigm, what sort of is the program promise or the outcome that they have at the end?
So the outcome is, and I guess you could say specifically in the marketing, the outcome that we're promising is pulling you out of that 10 to 20K quicksand. There seems to be this like pit between $10,000 and $20,000 where the only thing you've learned up to that point is effort. So it seems like more effort's required, but then you constantly run up against a wall.
Yeah.
And so there seems to be that pit, and the promise is taking you from that pit to at least $50,000 a month, where you can get some clearance from some of the more annoying day-to-day things and really start growing and use that money to really grow. And then the overall promise of the program is helping you build a company that you can sell, that you can scale and sell it. Because most service-based entrepreneurs don't even know that if you actually grow a company that in the correct way, where you have these systems in place beforehand, you build something that's sustainable, it doesn't require you can sell that. And so many service-based entrepreneurs who used to be high-level freelancers essentially trade their time for money, but they never get another ROI besides just their paycheck.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is you can build up this asset that isn't just paying your bills, but that's going to be something you can give away later for more money than you've put in. And that's what ultimately my goal for everyone who goes through this program. Although that will take longer than 90 days.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you're painting the long-term vision there. That's a critical point that you're making, because I think a lot of people don't realize that, structured incorrectly, your service-based business dies with you.
Yes.
If you're done working on it, it ain't going nowhere. And there's very few people who, even if you have a team, even if you've got great outcomes and deliveries, very few people will pick up a service business from an asset acquisition perspective without the right systems and processes in place, because they just think, hey, it's just basically a job for the owner. There's nothing here to buy. You just basically go do the service under a different business name.
Totally. I mean, and if you want to see a good example of this, and things take a while to sometimes build up to the point where they're really systemized. There's a great book. It's called CAA. What's it called? It's about creative arts agency. What's it called? I'm gonna look it up right now. It's called Powerhouse. It's called Powerhouse: The Story of CAA, which is Creative Arts Agency, which is a huge entertainment agency out here in LA. And they broke off from another big player called William Morris. This is back in the 70s, I believe. And it took years before that agency, which is now like the biggest player in the world, was more than just those four guys slinging actors around and putting together shows. And even though they've grown into something that's like a media magnate, they couldn't have done that without, over the years, putting in place those systems. So it wasn't just about them making phone calls.
Right.
Most people
and I think if you've never been through it before, it's I think people underestimate the systems and the processes that need to be there. But the very first consulting job I ever had right out of school was with a boutique firm in Chicago. And again, it was four guys out of one of the major consulting firms, and they started up this boutique firm, but they did it really in a smart way and had software and systems and processes, and they ended up being able to sell that thing off, which, boutique consulting firms, that's tough to do. They usually say die with the owner there. One of the things that you mentioned I want to dig into a little bit, you talked about this, in Profit Paradigm, one of the metrics that you're using to measure success is the dollar amount, right? You're going from
Yes.
10 to 20K a month to 50K a month. But beyond the dollar, because the dollar figures are sort of an obvious benefit, but
Right.
you seem to be describing that 50K-ish a month as a different place energetically in your business. Can you describe that a little bit more? How does that feel different for people than, say, at that 10 to 20K a month spot?
Well, I think what it really comes down to is that, many of us, so you got to think about the business owner at this point. Many of us come from a position of being the only ones in our family to do something on our own.
Mm-hmm.
So we start off and many of us, especially our clients, will come in and they'll have a skill they've gotten very good at. Over a period of time, they built that skill into something that is a true profession and a craft.
Yeah.
They become well known for that and well paid for that, because as they should be. And many of them, will start making six figures relatively soon into their, careers.
Yeah.
And once you start making like past 10 is a big barrier. 10 is a big, it's a big breath of fresh air, because most people will never make even 5 figures in a month.
Right.
I mean, even that alone is like rarefied air. And then you have this idea in your head that $20,000 or $30,000, because it seems like so much compared to an annual salary of someone who works a minimum wage job. This is my perspective of it. Because it seems like so much, like if your parents only made 50K a year growing up and you make 30K a month, in my head, I felt like that's got to be a lot of money, right? Because look at the comparison.
Right.
But $50,000 to a business owner is like the beginning of being able to breathe in most businesses. When you're still making, $250,000, $250,000 to half, it's still very difficult to pay good people, acquire all the systems you're going to need to, pay taxes, let alone pay yourself, and do that comfortably. And that's at 20 or 30K a month, not quite comfortable, because things are much more expensive than you would think. When you actually start to know your numbers and you start to see how much things cost, and you're actually doing, like, for instance, you're implementing something like Profit First, where you're actually dividing up where your money, where your gross revenue is going, and seeing that, actually only have 73% of this to operate with, and so it seems like even less. Then you take out taxes, like, wow, $20,000 ends up being $8,000 a month to work with. You're like, all right, fuck. So 50,000 is where it starts to just get, whoo,
right.
There's a little bit of a breath. 50 to 100 is the race you want to be in right now.
So this kind of earnings and profitability breakdown that you're talking about, is that part of what you do, is to help people understand their numbers a little bit better as well as part of the program?
That's a great question. Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's so important, because so many of us, myself included, get to this point where we haven't learned to master the revenue portion of the business. We've only learned how to master marketing. Maybe we've even gotten good at sales, but we're treating the business like an ATM.
Right.
We're treating the business like we haven't turned off the mindset of, like, this is my personal piggy bank, and into the mindset of, I'm the steward of all this company's resources, and it needs to be attributed accordingly. And so most CEOs forget that if they don't have a CFO, they're the CFO.
Right.
They have to be they have to have weekly meetings with the CFO and look at numbers and really understand what's going on. And you can't just spend out of one bank account. You have to, there are ways of managing your finances, and until you do that, you're never going to be able to. I mean, even if you're able to make more sales, you'll never be able to get momentum, because you'll always be just leaking money out of the bottom of the car.
Right. Now that's a critical element on the path of what you've described, of moving from 10 to 20K a month to 50K. Oh, what are some of the other elements? Can you walk us through kind of the process that you take people through in the program? What are some of the other milestones that people have to reach?
So, I mean, the first milestone is, and this is kind of how we look at the process. We look at the process as, the first is just doing a deep discovery on where you're at. It's almost like you're at the mall and you have one of those interactive maps that says, you are here. You have to know where you are in order to have a better perspective on where you want to go. And so we spend a good amount of time getting people back to basics, which seems like, oh, I've already come this far. I don't need to look at my messaging again. I don't need to look at what my offers are and see where the most valuable ones are. I don't need to look at my avatar. I did that 2 years ago. Like, we take it all the way back, and we spend some time getting into the essence of what your business is really good at and what it's not good at, and stripping down those pieces so that you can predictably make offers that people actually want. That alone, fixing it, I think Elon Musk would call this like first order principles.
Okay.
Like breaking it down to the very bare elements of it. If your business isn't working, there might be something very, very early on in the iteration that's causing the problem. And a lot of times it's, oh, your avatars, you're just going for the wrong person.
Yep.
Or, oh, your offer doesn't really make sense, but if you just move this around. And so even in that first stage, and as we bring people up the kind of through the process, breakthroughs happen because sometimes the difference between 15K and 30K is just you making a slight position change.
Sure.
Yeah. And so that's that's just the first step. It's just the discovery step.
Yeah, and a critical first step. I mean, I was New York Times had an article the other day on top 10 reasons businesses fail. The number one reason, which was really fascinating, is that the math doesn't work. Like, it never would have worked.
Yeah.
You could bust your tail all day long. It won't matter. But the market and the pricing and the delivery expenses, like, never ever would work. And so that work of just understanding what actually are you trying to do? What are the numbers? What have you done so far? Can save a lot of heartache down the road if you can solve the problem early on.
Well, and just, I think this is worth saying here, because I think people can probably relate to this, even if they'll never admit to it. There's a lot of shame around numbers.
Sure.
And around dealing with finances and entrepreneurship, because, I think naturally, not all the time, but naturally, the people who gravitate toward entrepreneurship tend to be not necessarily risk positive, but a little bit more eager to step out on an ambitious whim. And in order to make those jumps, sometimes we're not always thinking, oh, what are the tax implications of this going to be? Or, how much of this is profit and how much of this is supposed to be spent on operating expenses? Like, we're just trying to make money and trying to make our vision happen.
Right.
And that's a great mentality to have to start. You have to have that fire, that spark, to kind of get over your ignorance and just kind of move through it. But then there reaches a certain stage where you have to say, okay, not all of this can just be self-taught anymore. Like, I'm going to have to look around to see what's worked for others.
Yeah.
And just model at least some of the best practices, even if I innovate in other areas. One of the places I wouldn't innovate is finances. I would just go off of what happened, of what works best there, and innovate in other areas.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes perfect sense. Okay. So discover essentially is the first step. What's after that?
Then it's design. It's figuring out what the design of the program is going to be, or what the design of your company is going to be. And part of this comes down to you understanding how org charts work, how you actually put the right butts in the right seats. We use a few different books as the curriculum and as the backbone for the program. One of those books is Traction by Gino Wickman.
Yeah.
So if you haven't read that book, pick it up.
Yeah, it's a great book.
It's a fantastic book. And just the idea of knowing that everybody has a specific role to play and everyone needs to be accountable to having certain things accomplished is it's so simple, but it's mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing. I had one student who just signed up to join the program, and she has 16 employees, but all the employees are doing the same job essentially. They're all just doing tasks, but they're not taking leadership of a certain role, and there are no real responsibilities. And but this happens a lot because, again, coming from that high-level freelancer stage, you are just used to collaborating with people and just like getting together and doing the work, but you need an org structure. So we help our companies build their org structure out. And then in this design process, it's also designing your internal system, the core. So we show them how to look at cash flow and expenses, how to we help them solve what we call a dashboard, which has all the metrics that are going on in the business at any given time to see trends and to make predictive analysis about things. We'll help them to design all their core values and make sure that everything inside the company is structured in a way where they can start bringing good people in. They understand how much money is flowing through the business, and they feel like much more of a leader in that stage.
Nice. That sounds like a really holistic approach. Great. And then so you've done design, then what comes after that?
Well, to be quite honest, you
had a deconstruct piece in there.
So the thing we have a 5D formula. That is a thing, but we've been now that we've actually been running the program, we've changed the acronym.
Oh, okay.
And so I'm starting with so I started to go in with the D's with you, and I'm like, oh, we changed the acronym. But basically it's like, look, the process is you figure out where you are, you build the company. Okay. The next phase is executive training. So we do philosophy and executive training. We'll take a lot of stuff from Ray Dalio. We work with Scaling Up from Vern Harnish, and we help them to develop their executive strategy for the long-term goal. And then we teach them sales processes. We take them through different modules on marketing, and we just help them to build a system where their service becomes productized.
Got it.
That's the end goal. So like there's a whole acronym. We have to come up with what the process is called again, because it makes it sexier when I say it on podcasts, or it's brandable. But the outcome is you go through this process of figuring out the company, figuring out yourself, and building your service into a product. And the reason why we do that is because then it's repeatable and it's predictably growable. Whereas every entrepreneur that is coming into the program, coming into the system, is coming in with essentially one-off services that they've been spending all their time doing, and they don't have anything they can do except pour time in. So we're showing them how to leverage that time and turn those essentially into products and just create the assembly line.
Well, it's fascinating that you've got that leadership component in there, the executive training and leadership piece, because I think a lot of people, when they think about business model change, aren't thinking about the head of the company as one of the things that has to change.
I mean, think about how much effort companies put into recruiting, and that will tell you how much they value leaders.
Right. That's a good point. That's
one of my clients has Samsung as a client, and they pay her almost 6 figures a month just so that she'll recruit for them.
Yeah.
So how much are those recruits worth to them if they're willing to pay her almost 6 figures to just find people?
Yeah.
That's
for good companies. That's something they value. Not every corporation, in my experience, unfortunately.
No, not at all.
Right. The good ones do.
The good ones do. Yeah. Well, I think Samsung is as close to $1 trillion company as you're going to get.
Yeah. It's definitely a good model.
It's a good model. Yeah, it's a good model. Although they don't quite necessarily conform to the don't do everything model. They pretty much do everything, but they've taken 100 years to get.
Well, they're a large business. They get to do that. No, I like to describe leadership as this I guess the different phases of leadership as kind of growing through this place where you start off, like you just described earlier, kind of managing tasks.
Yeah.
And then you move up to this place where you're managing people who are managing strategy, and then they're all managing different businesses. And so you can have people running off in lots of different directions. A company like Samsung Corporation, like them, they can pull that off. But it does take an evolution, I think, in how you think about what your job is as leader in order to pull that off.
Totally. I mean, when you look at, like, you can zoom all the way in or all the way out. You look at, like, the owner of a local, like a convenience store, who is the owner and the operator. And I guess technically they are a CEO, but they're owner operator as well.
Right.
And an analogy or a little anecdote that Robert Kiyosaki said in one of his books is he said, he had a family friend who owned a convenience store, and they had bars in the windows, and he was wondering whether the bars were keeping people out or keeping the shop owner in.
I do remember that anecdote, actually.
Yeah, it's a colorful one. And so you have owner operators down at the very bottom of that owner spectrum, and then you have all the way up to, you have the Richard Bransons of the world,
Sure.
who are the CEO of a parent group, and that parent group has individual companies in it.
Right.
And so what's the range of thought processes between those two types of people, and where are you on that spectrum? And you don't have to do Richard Branson. It doesn't matter. It's more, but just being aware of that spectrum and saying, okay, I want to operate more at a strategic level where I can move bigger pieces around. Richard Branson has the same number of hours that you do in your day, but the way that he's created his universe to spend his time means that when he does things, they have much bigger impact and bigger leverage.
Right.
And you can do that to your own level of comfort and flexibility, with your business, as you learn how to become a better leader and bring people in who will do the things that you're not good at, the things that you don't have time for, the things that aren't even in your core area of focus or interest, and you can exit out.
Nice. Well, and it sounds like the philosophy is, listen, if you want to get your service business to any place where it becomes an asset, you need to start thinking like the folks who are leading larger organizations and are thinking about leverage every single day.
One thing I would recommend for anyone listening, is go to the grocery store or whatever, and get like an Entrepreneur magazine or an Inc. magazine, the physical magazine, the actual magazine.
Yeah.
Because the stuff in the magazine is actually, it's still better than the online stuff, just because it's slightly harder to get in there, so it's not complete trash. And they do really good profiles on different up and coming entrepreneurs in those magazines, and start reading what's going on in your industry and seeing what's happening in trends outside of your market. Because then you'll see how leaders in other fields are doing things. So I'll give you a quick example. I was reading about the founders of this one company, Sweet Green, which is a salad company here in California.
Okay. And
they were going to IPO, and they're already doing $1 billion plus. They're going to IPO, and their board wanted them to IPO, and they were about to. And they, at the last minute, they said, we're not going to do it, because why? The board said, why aren't you going to do it? And they said, because we don't want to IPO as a restaurant. We want to IPO as a tech company. And the board's like, you're not a tech company. You're a restaurant. You have 87 locations. You're clearly a restaurant. And they're like, no, we want to be a platform for food. We want to be the Apple of the space, not the next Chipotle. And so what they are proposing now, and this is an example in radical leadership. What they're proposing now is that their new platform for Sweet Green is going to be essentially, you have an app on your phone, you enter in your health information, even if you have a 23andMe, maybe there's some genetic information that's pulled in, plus what you're desiring to weigh, what the specifications are, different variables. And whenever you're hungry, a meal finds you, whether you're walking, and they have kiosks all over the place that bring meals right to you based on your exact specifications for what your needs are that day, based on how you're feeling, or it can come to your house, or you can pick it up on the way. And so anywhere you are, wherever their platform is, you have a meal waiting for you.
Yeah.
And they're thinking of their services more as Netflix for food than a restaurant. And so they raised $200 million to now reposition into a tech company. And I was reading this in Inc. And I was so glad that I was reading this, because it takes my head out of my ass when it comes to like just being in the info product space or being in the training space, the entrepreneurs on entrepreneurs space. You look and you say, okay, this is what the big boys are doing up here. And how can I adapt some of this more holistic, solving a lot of problems mindset that real fortune companies have, and adopt that in my own way, but excel in my space because of it.
Yeah. Well, and that's going to be the difference right there between, somebody take a service, but let's say I'm an HR consultant, and all I do is HR training. If I think of myself as an HR consultant, I'm never going to break out of that mindset of basically have invented a job for myself rather than having an asset for a business. You gotta pivot into the problem solving space. You got to think about the vision of, what would it be if you were going to sell, if you were going to go for a tech kind of a leveraged IPO number rather than a franchised food establishment, which is a very different valuation formula.
Totally different. And that's a risky bet that they made on themselves.
It is.
I'm sure they would have done well as a restaurant and be able to cash out nicely.
Yep.
One of my other mentors, Jay Sammet, who used to run I think he was VP at Sony or Capitol Records and a few different other places, and super media guy, told me that whenever he would go into an investment situation or a situation starting a new business rather, he would always think before he even started with the ideation for this new business, who's going to buy this?
Yeah.
Who's going to buy this when we're done with this? Back it into that.
Yeah.
That's
the right question to ask.
And at the end of the day, how does Amazon pick this up? That's what I want to know.
Right.
Yeah. At the end of the day, there are 5 people who buy things. How do they get this?
Yeah. Yeah. Every tech startup I've ever been a part of, everyone knows who the potential buyer list is on day one. That's kind of that's the way to do it. And you bring, I think what's terrific is you're bringing that thought process into an industry, a vertical that doesn't think like that very often.
Exactly. Service-based businesses never think like this.
Right. It's almost the sort of, it's the last thing, almost.
The last thing.
Right.
Yeah, because they're just thinking about how can I raise my monthly salary?
Right. How do I get my income up as opposed to thinking, completely, right?
It's the wrong question, and most likely the answer to that question is always going to be work more hours from a service-based perspective, right?
Yeah, that's it. That's
the wrong question. Unless
you've cracked that nut, that is all you're left with.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Daniel, I know that you're busy. We've got, we asked for a little bit of time to interview you. I really appreciate you spending the time with us. But for those folks in the audience who are listening and are thinking they've got to get more of you, more of this, how do they get in touch with you? How best can they start that process off?
You teed that up so nicely for me. Well, you can find me anywhere on the socials at Daniel DiPiazza, like Mike Piazza, Daniel DiPiazza, and Alpha Mentorship is the same, at Alpha Mentorship.
Okay.
Check out alphamentorship.com as well, ALPHA, alphamentorship.com. And we have just a bunch of different free trainings there. I just dropped like a 4,000 word guide on scaling last week. Some good free information there, so check it out.
Alphamentorship.com. Go partake from the veritable smorgasbord of value that is the homepage there. Actually, I've been there. There's a ton of stuff.
There's a ton of stuff.
You could spend a lot of time there just downloading stuff and learning from what you've got there. So that 4,000 page guide on scaling, that's a new one there. Yeah,
it's not even, there's no opt-in. It's just a really, really, really long article with just examples and pictures and videos. It's just free.
Awesome. Great stuff.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Profit Paradigm is the program. Alpha Mentorship is the company. Daniel DiPiazza is the alpha of that.
You honor me.
Thank you so much for spending time with us, Daniel. Really appreciate it. And for those of you in the audience, thanks so much for being here. And this was a 6 to 7 figure show. Thanks for being here, and we will catch you next time.